Look, on balance, yes, that might sound like a political answer, on the one hand this, on the one hand that, but I think particularly over, say, the last 5 years, you'd have to say the scorecard was richer on the innovative side than on the negative side. And that's partly because of what seems to have been, reasonable access to venture capital money, and that was put in the hands of various sort of disruptive ideas, if you like, trying to break into the industry that's about as difficult as breaking into the nuclear energy industry. It's not a sort of all yes scorecard, but I think on balance, and certainly recently, there have been some good innovations.
Pockets of it are, I believe. I mean, from my experience, it's well behind banking and insurance. However, that's not really surprising given the level of engagement is very different across those industries. So yes, superannuation is probably lagging behind in the financial services sector. However, there are pockets, especially with the way the personalisation is going in the digital space, that are a little bit more innovative.
I like to think that the industry is certainly thinking about innovative. I think the execution is somewhat challenging for the industry. I think we have barriers, and so unfortunately barriers, and one of them being regulatory obligations and requirements actually do stifle that innovation.
Well, first one is money. What's your innovation budget? It's all very well to talk about innovation, but how much it's going to cost, and where does the money come from? And unquestionably, regulatory complexities. We call it superannuation, and in other countries they have different names for it, but it's effectively a global business. Then what we do in Australia is we wrap it into so much taxation, things that are just very, very different from what happens in other countries, and then we keep painting and repainting it with yet more and more regulation. That makes it extremely difficult to sort of step back and sort of innovate around that. And I think also, certainly in the default space, and this isn't an original thought, but there are relatively low competitive pressures. It's not a normal industry. I often regard superannuation as a public-private partnership. It's a very paternalistic and specific set of rules, and then you have private industry kind of providing that service, but it's very much under the wing, if you like, of the government dictating where it's heading.
To me, it's the perception that a highly regulated industry can't innovate, which I think is, to me, the opposite is true. If you are heavily regulated, then you look for every opportunity to innovate. Every different regulatory change, that's your opportunity to throw some innovation in there. Creates an exciting place for people to work as well, rather than just doing regulatory projects. They're doing regulatory projects where they might be able to put a little unique twist on it as well.
Well, I think it's time and budget, because when regulatory changes are required, unfortunately the budget that is in place for other spend gets handed over to implement the regulatory changes, and so all of a sudden you've got the individuals who are looking to drive innovation actually having to execute on changes that are required for the super funds just to continue on as BAU.
Well, I suppose reducing cost is an obvious one. And so it's looking around the organisation, including outsourced arrangements, and saying, well, how can we reduce the cost of this? There is, there's a strong member focus with funds, and that translates commercially into a sort of a member retention thing. And so a fair bit of focus is put on the user experience. Some critics say that the industry's been pretty slow to develop decent apps and that kind of thing, but that's easy to say. It's where do you get the money to do that? But I think there has been a strong driver towards user experience, capturing and using data in a way that helps members and so on.
Digitisation, definitely. I think, everybody's used to doing anything they want to do in that device in the palm of their hand. So that drives innovation across all sorts of sectors and different industries, and superannuation is no different there. And key to survival as well. There are disruptors in the marketplace. They start as technology companies who do banking, do insurance, do superannuation, probably to a lesser extent because of the regulatory changes. But if there's continual disruption around you, you have to innovate. You have to keep moving.
I think there still is recognition that, members and clients have desires or have requests. And so I think that, their demands, and perhaps demands is too strong a word, but their wants and needs is certainly something that funds continue to look for solutions. Sometimes I think being able to drive those solutions is ultimately what will see success, and see success in funds that are able to differentiate themselves. Because I think going forward, we might be put in a position where everyone is going to look the same because of the requirements from a regulatory perspective. And so how will the funds be able to differentiate themselves? And that differentiation will come down to what are their members looking for, and perhaps any other stakeholders that they have to manage.
It'll be technology that comes from certainly outside the super industry, and I suppose everybody would say this, but I think blockchain is hovering out there somewhere, and I suppose the one signal that there could be a pretty major step change in this space is the announcement recently that Vanguard had selected Grow Super to do the admin for its new low-cost super product. We've seen the ASX come out strongly in favour of blockchain, but there have been the inevitable teething problems and some delay in the program there. I suppose the one area that's really calling out for some big innovation is in the advice space. So we've currently got the government tasking ASIC to sort of see whether within its patch, there might be some things that it can do and this is all about reducing two things. It's reducing cost and increasing the accessibility of good financial advice. I look at it and I think, well, look, the ideas behind the way it's regulated come from the Wallace Review that was kicked off in 1996. That does happen to be a quarter of a century ago. And so they, at that time, were looking at, how things were done in the 80s and 90s. That's ancient history now. It's seeking to fight the last war, I think. And so, some sort of really dramatic change in the way advice is thought of and regulated and delivered. Regulating the algorithms and models and the sort of tech that sits behind it. And you'd be seeking to really get the message across that it is not a paper-based thing. You still hear people talking nonsense about 80-page statements of advice and all that just has to be bulldozed out of the way if we're going to have ordinary Australians getting good and reasonably priced advice. I think that's the change that's most obvious to me. The arrival of the consumer data right in super is also possibly something that could really kick the way we do things and the way we do things digitally could really kick that off.
My view on this is the deaccumulation phase and advice, I think in particular, are areas that are ripe for innovation and doing something a bit different, especially following Royal Commission and the demographic shifts as well within, for members who've been in superannuation for a long time, now looking to take it out rather than put it in. So yes, I believe those two areas in particular are ripe for innovation.
Unfortunately, I still do think that regulatory change will drive the next big thing. And I think what we saw was some moves towards retirement and finding better solutions towards retirement. But I do think that that's where the next innovative change will need to come. We still do need to find ways to make sure that the industry is not just an accumulation industry, but is also a retirement industry. So I'm hoping that that's where the next big innovation will come through.
We're working on a digital tool that helps pre-retirees conceive their retirement more confidently by just stepping them through, what they might expect to get from the age pension and just how things are going to look. And we're very happy with the way that's going. We recently bought, I don't think we've settled on it yet, but we recently bought a small ADI, a small bank. We're going to invest the deposits we get in that business in a different way, in the way that we invest our annuities book. We'll be able, it's all ahead of us. I'm not going to sort of speculate about what we might do, but the innovations there are really, up to us to see what we can do. We may, for example, be able to offer you a term deposit that goes way beyond the current sort of norms of 3 to 5 years. We may be able to offer you a 10-year one. So that's very exciting. Recently also we've worked out how to slightly market link our lifetime annuities. So we've got an RBA cash option, so you can buy a lifetime annuity that has some upside to it in interest rate terms linked to the RBA cash rate. We were certainly in the first pack of Australian fund managers to issue active ETFs. We've got 2 of those. We also have an innovative wholesale. We sell quite a bit of this to the super industry, but we have a way of guaranteeing a margin above a range of indices. So we could give you, it's effectively a total return swap, and you could say to us, well, we want 25 basis points above whatever the ASX 200 does over the X, whatever the term is. We can effectively we can contract to give you a certain amount of alpha above a range of indices. So that's quite an innovative product. And also in recent times, we've worked out with the relationship we have with one of our major shareholders, in fact, Mitsui Sumitomo, a Japanese bank. We've worked out a way initially to issue Australian dollar denominated long-term annuities into the Japanese market, and now we're also reinsuring US dollar ones as well. So
we're embedding experimentation, that test and learn, into our culture a lot more. We're increasing agility so that we can really prioritize and focus and move quickly. I think that moving quickly through things is something that's really gaining traction. So test and learn really quickly. Our fund has a very specific demographic, and therefore our value proposition is very much aligned to the uniqueness of our own fund. So having that very quite firm in our strategy now, everyone can gather behind it, and then we can go forward with this greater agility and this more propensity to test and learn. I think that's really starting to gain traction now. And gathering more pain points, unmet needs, member research and industry scans from our member, and making that a very member-centric design. So we have our Voice of the Member channel now that it's a fortnightly stand-up where people within the organisation who are dealing with members on a daily basis, whether it be on the phone, via email, web chat, any of those channels, all come together and just share experiences from the members' perspective, so that we are continuously gathering that feedback from the member, and we can feed that into our programs.
Data analytics is definitely something that we have spent a lot of time and a lot of money in. The way that we're actually using data analytics is making sure that we have call outs and observations that we can then provide recommendations to do something, and to do it because we've actually got the data to support why a change is required. For example, we did a readiness assessment for the new internal dispute resolution rules that come in October. And what we actually did was we actually looked at the data around the current disputes or complaints or inquiries that a particular fund had. And with that data, we were actually able to allow them to understand the types of inquiries, when these inquiries were happening, how they were responding to them, how long it took them to respond, etc. And what it actually allowed them to do was then determine where the uplift was going to be required to make sure that they could comply with the new rules that come in October. So it was giving them some guidance on how they could actually prepare their business for the new regulatory change.